Hi, I'm Amy.
I'm Laura.
And we are Two Paper Girls. Today we've got a really exciting video coming for you. We're doing our favourite books of 2016, which is just awesome because we get to talk about our favourite books. We've got 10 each, so we've got a lot to get through.
We're not really going to give you any detailed summaries or anything because that's all in our wrap-ups and on Goodreads and all that kind of thing. We're just going to talk about why it's a personal favourite. So we're going to try and make this video as short as possible because we've got 20 books to get through.
My first favourite book of the year was The Walking Dead Compendium because I absolutely adore The Walking Dead, and this was Compendium 3, and everything's kicking off with the new bad guy Negan, and it's just beautifully drawn and gorgeous, and I would recommend this graphic novel to anyone.
My first one is probably my least favourite of the year, but I did give it 5 stars, and that is a speech by J.K. Rowling, which is Very Good Lives. I remember reading this in January when I had January blues, and it just lifted my spirits and made me feel like I could do anything. I feel like I need to revisit when I graduate because it's like a graduation speech in America, so it's just going to mean a lot when I'm at that stage in my life. But it was just really uplifting and just an adorable quick read.
My next favourite is To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. This was a reread for the 5th time in my life because I absolutely adore this classic. I'm doing my dissertation on Woolf. I love everything about her. She's such a complex human being, and this book is just so wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey.
My next favourite was A Dark Shade of Magic, which was my first introduction to V.E. Schwab, and I really loved it. It was a whole huge fantasy world, and I always thought I would love it. It just took me a while to get around to it, but I thought it was absolutely great. I loved all the characters were so complex and really interesting, and I'm really excited to pick up the sequel because I've heard great things about Gathering of Shadows, and I met V.E. Schwab this year, which was a great memory of 2016. So I just thought A Dark Shade of Magic was brilliant, and it helped me pick up a later book in this list.
The next book is The Last Family in England by Matt Haig, which I would recommend anyone to read because Matt Haig is a brilliant writer, and this book stood out for me in particular because it is narrated by a dog, and it follows the dog's life and how he keeps his family together and all the different gangs of all the different species of dog in the neighbourhood. And this book just pulls on your heartstrings. It's so emotional. It's just a gorgeous read.
My next 5-star read of the year was The Enchanted by Renee Denfeld. I think I read this in summer sometime, and it's been the first book in a while that was adult and just really beautifully written. I read a lot of YA and a lot of books for uni, which I have enjoyed but hasn't really pulled at my heartstrings, and this just had really beautiful messages and metaphors, and even though it was quite slow and not very plot driven, I just found the writing really gorgeous. I've got folded over corners from my favourite quotes, which I haven't had in a while, and I can just really see myself rereading this book and getting more out of it every time because it was just so beautifully written.
My next book is Standoff by Andrew Smith. It's the second book in the duology called Winger. Standoff was so much better than Winger. I absolutely loved the story and the direction it took. The characters that I didn't like Annie, the main female character, I didn't like in Winger, I loved in Standoff. It just took such a funny, cute, but really heartwarming turn, because Winger ends quite sadly. It's very heartbreaking, and then Standoff just brings it all back and makes it all happy, and it graduates, and it's just such a lovely ending to the duology.
My next 5-star read was one by Sarah Crossan, which I remember reading in summer during the booktubeathon lying on the beach with Amy and Skegness, and it was wonderful. And this is one of the first books I've read that's written in verse, which was a really new reading experience, but also it was just about these conjoined twins, and it was such an original story nothing I've ever read before, and the way it was told really added to that because you had dual perspective, and it was just written in verse and just made it really poetic and beautiful.
My next favourite is actually an entire series, and this is Attack on Titan. I'm absolutely adoring this series. The new one has just come out, volume 20, and I haven't read it yet, but it's bound to be awesome. And the series is coming out next year, and they're going to dub it about late 2017, early 2018. So I finally get to see it all in the graphic novels on screen, and it's just going to be fab. It's such a brilliant story. It's very different to what I was expecting.
My next one is Isla and the Happily Ever After, and although this wasn't a 5-star read, I read it at such a perfect time. I hadn't read a cutie romancy book for a long time, and I read it on holiday with my boyfriend Robin, celebrating our 5 years together in Greece, which was just the perfect time to read a cutesy romance, especially one where they travel a bit. So I read this at just the right time to get the most out of it, and although it had its flaws, I just thought it was adorable, and I really like what Stephanie Perkins does with couples because it doesn't feel tropey and bad. It was just really sweet, and I ate it up. I thought it was great.
The next one is also on my list, one by Sarah Crossan, for the same reasons. I read it on the beach. It was lovely. The context of it just fell into place. It was a booktubeathon book, and I just absolutely loved it. It got 5 stars because of its difference
This is humongous. Basically, I talk about this in my Christmas book haul. This is the deluxe edition of the illustrated Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. I didn't read this edition when it was my favourite, but I don't have that with me. But this was just such a new way of experiencing Harry Potter. I read it again during the booktubeathon. I remember being snuggled up in bed, listening to the soundtrack and just feeling immersed in the story in such a new way. And all the art really fit like how I imagined everything and took me away from just picturing the films in my head the entire time. And it was just a great reading experience and definitely got 5 stars.
One of my next favourite books of the year was Frontlines by Michael Grant. The sequel to this is coming out in January, as Laura told me earlier. I'm very excited. This was brilliant. It was a bit different for Michael Grant. He is really good though at writing from the perspective of girls, because usually you're like, oh god, what's this male gender person talking about girls again? But this, he's done it amazingly well, and I haven't read a bad view of this. So pick it up, it's amazing.
My next 5-star book was another one in summer. I had a great reading summer, and that was Life of Pi by Jan Martel. You've heard us on this channel talk about this book a lot because Amy goes on about it because it's one of her favourite books, and I've gone on about it saying how I need to read it. And I finally did, and I loved it. I thought the writing was beautiful. I loved all the clever ending on which story do you believe, and it was just a really beautiful story of religion and strength, and I just thought it was absolutely amazing.
My next favourite is The Girl with All the Gifts by, I have forgotten.
It's not Mariah Carey, but it's something Carey or Carey.
Anyway, this had to appear on my favourites list because this is one of the most, actually it is the best zombie novel I have read. I've read quite a few, and this one just took the biscuit. It was written so well, adult book, it's got all the character development you want in it, but it's also got some pretty gruesome stuff, but then it's also got a good resolved ending, which you don't tend to get in zombie worlds, because you're like, well, how can it resolve? Like, that's the world now. But it did all of those things.
My next one is slightly lower down on this favourites list, but I still had to include it, and that is Richard III by William Shakespeare. You all know I'm a slut for Shakespeare, but I've kind of been stuck in this comfort zone of Hamlet and Macbeth are my favourites, and I read quite a lot for uni, but none of them have really hit that favourites level. But me and Amy saw the Ralph Fiennes version of this in the cinema, and then I read it, and then we watched the Ian McKellen version, then I watched the Benedict Cumberbatch version, Hollow Crown, so I've just had a lot of Richard III this year, and it's just made me really appreciate how good this play is. It's just so complex. I love all the villain aspects, and it's definitely the best history play.
My next favourite is A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J Maas. I absolutely adore this book. This is definitely one of my favourites of the entire year. The characters blew me away, the plot blew me away, just everything about these books is just a guilty pleasure that you just don't care about. And the last book in the trilogy is coming out this year, so I'm just like, everything is awesome.
Now on to my top 2 favourites of the year, and the first one being Vicious by V.E. Schwab. I read A Dark Shade of Magic earlier, and that was also on the favourites list, but I love this even more. I like that it was one story and not a series, because there's not many good standalones knocking around anymore really. But I just absolutely love the dynamic of this. I love the 2 best friends that hate each other. That was such a good plot point, and it just kept me reading, and it's such an amazing creative world of basically superheroes, but it doesn't feel like that. It's very dark and twisted, and it's not really like anything I've ever read before.
The Christmasaurus by Tom Fletcher had to make my list as well, because this book made me cry, it made me laugh. It is a middle grade book, it's a book for children, but I just could not believe how much I love this book. I loved cuddling down in bed to read it every night, and it just gave me that feeling of being one of my favourite books. But the way it was written and the plot also gave it a 5 stars, because it's just a brilliantly written book.
And my top book of the year is On the Other Side by Carrie Hope Fletcher. It was hard picking this above the others, but this really feels like a newfound favourite forever. I just keep thinking about these characters, I keep thinking about this world. I'm so eager to read anything else that Carrie writes, because I thought the writing was beautiful. It was such clever storytelling. I'm not normally one for magical realism either, but I was sold in this book. It made me cry, and I haven't cried at a book in a really long time. It just gave me so many feelings, and I already want to reread it, and it's just absolutely gorgeous.
This book is also one of my favourites of 2016. I just had to tag it on the end of Laura's, because it's just, I have to just say how much I love it too. It was just brilliant, and Carrie is just such a role model, and everything she writes we're going to read and we're going to love. But this book, just everything about it, the way it looks, the way it reads, it's just beautiful, and we're just so lucky to have read such brilliant books in 2016.
So that's it for our favourites list. Hopefully we got through those 20 books and it didn't take too long, but hopefully you enjoyed it anyway. Sorry we couldn't go into more detail.
We'll put all the links to the books down below if you want to go find them and read them. Let us know if you do like them or if you're going to read them. And we'll see you on the next video. Bye!